All right, super important. As we're about to finish out this block of product development for your spices, all right, it's super important to understand why texture matters. And you'll be surprised to know it's not what you think. Let's jump into it. So texture isn't just about how seasonings or your blends feel, but it actually also is about how it tastes, right? So depending on the texture of your seasoning or your blend, you can have something that's really enjoyable to something that is not so enjoyable, right? Like think about it. Your seasonings can go from a powder form all the way to a texture of a crunch, right? So that's very far in between, right? And then in the middle of that, you have the texture of something that's similar to, let's say, salt or sugar, right? So just so you see the variations, there's powder, there's salt and sugar in the middle, and then there is crunch at the end, which would be similar to like a onion or a shallot or a garlic flakes, right? You know, something along those lines, right? So it's really important that you figure out the type of blend that you want to provide to the world and the application of that blend. Now, if you're trying to do something where it's like a balm or like a broth or something like that, then powder is totally cool because you want it to disintegrate. You want it to melt and dissolve very quickly. So powders are great. But if you're looking for a finishing situation, right, and it does not need to be cooked necessarily, then the crunches are more better for that. But if you need something in the middle that you can cook with or you can use as a finishing, then you want to stay in the middle. All right, super important that you understand the difference between the three and you figure out where you want to fall in between, because it's very important, because this will make or break your blend. You dig? And this is how you know texture really affects how your seasonings taste. We can make the same exact seasoning in terms of using the same ingredients, have the same recipe, but if you make your mix and it's fine and I make my mix coarse or vice versa, one's gonna taste very different from the other, right? And one will actually end up tasting better than the other because of the perfect texture. So when you're working with private label companies, if you're not gonna do it yourself, you can have them give you the exact texture you want, from powder to fine to medium to coarse, right? So this is where you get to really add and really create the texture that you want, because texture is not just for food when we're eating, it's about everything that has to do with food, in terms of seasonings, in terms of ingredients, all of it matters. The other thing about texture is that it is responsible for flavor. It's responsible for flavor release. All right, and what do I mean by that? The finer it is, the faster it hits your palate, the faster you taste it, right? The more coarse it is, you have to kind of do a little bit of work, right? And then it slowly introduces those flavor profiles to you, right? So something to think about when you're creating your mix. Something you want to think about, right? If you are, let's say you're trying to make a barbecue rub, right? A barbecue blend, then you want to pay attention to what that texture is going to be like. Because if it's very coarse, that's going to be the worst barbecue rub ever. But if it's fine, right, then it's going to stick a lot more to whatever it is that you're rubbing it on, right? So really pay attention to that. Texture in terms of your blend and the way you're able to apply it is super, super important. The other thing I would say is perceived value is also tied to texture, right? Powdery, dusty blends people associate with cheap, right? But when there's texture, when you can see the ingredients, right? Not only taste them, when you can actually see the individual ingredients, then that value is perceived to be more premium and more higher quality. So you want to remember that texture creates really amazing contrast when it comes to enjoying your blends, right? So you can get flakes from things like herbs, you can get crunch and a harder, crunchier texture from seeds, and then once you're able to have all of those different properties in your blend, automatically you're creating a really amazing mouthfeel. You're creating a really nice experience in terms of what that blend is going to be like, because everything is not just this one-dimensional, one-note powder, right? So it really pays for you to know what is the end product going to be used for. What is the application of this blend, right? Is it for flavoring a broth or a liquid? Is it for finishing? Is it for cooking, right? All of these things will vary depending on what you want to use or what you want people to use your blend for. If you're only thinking about flavor when you do your blends, then you're skipping out and you're taking away half of the experience from anyone that is going to buy your seasonings, right? Flavor is one part of it. The texture, the experience, all of that combines is what gives you this whole cohesive flavor blend that actually is worth people spending. If your seasoning looks like dust, don't expect it to sell unless you're selling powders, right? If you're not selling powders, then you really need to pay attention to what your mix looks like, all right? Until next time, stay fresh and keep seasoning.